Hello and welcome. I am Tijmen Doppen and I'll be doing present my research on self-service business intelligence. So first let me tell what self-service business intelligence actually is, and we'll start with the business intelligence of it. So business intelligence is pretty much a collection of strategies, tactics and operations to collect, convert and interpret information from data. And the SS about it, or self-service, is more or less user-friendly standalone full BI applications for users, and in which they can partake into the process. So I've pretty much researched I've researched on this the causal factors for success and failure, and I've done this for about a small 2 years now, and I got some surprising results and recommendations, and so hopefully you guys, I'll be able to help a few of you guys. So let's look at the contents of the presentation. So the contents of the presentation roughly follow a similar, I have similarities with the report. So hopefully I won't talk about things you guys already know quite a lot about. So we skip some of the definitions and some of the big tables in mathematics, as I've assumed that everybody has at least read or scanned the report or work in this field, or have seen this the abstract. So without further ado, let's get into it. Well, first let me talk a bit about the statistics of the field and the problem. So you can see on the left side the implementation rate of SSBI in organizations, and it's between 5 and 25% of organizations have this, which is kind of low. And next to that you see the failure rate of SSBI implementation projects, which is between 50 and 80%, which is kind of high. And the return on investment of a project is successful is around 1300%, which is also kind of high. What this states is that that projects to implement SSBI can be quite a risky investment. Nonetheless, as you can see on the right, specific investments over the years in the history have been rising, and are even projected to rise even further in the future. So this looks like that quite a lot of money is wasted in the world due to SSBI, and I think some people around us are pretty much a bit guilty on that one as well, but nonetheless. And you probably can also think of some problems that can cause it, and so did I. And I've come up with this small problem model, and it's based on my own experiences, literature review and expert opinions. Mainly concerns traditional BI, and what it tells us can tell us is that data managers are pretty much swamped with incident management, problem management, the small things to keep the business model running. And this is largely due because of a limited human capital in the field. Good personnel in this sector is hard to find, but also there's limited responsibility and limited knowledge on the user side of things, so which can also be a problem, and especially in the backend processes and data warehouse process, ETL processes, as there's no transparency for users there, and they remain ignorant on the topic, and this can even lead to false assumptions, and therefore development on this topic can lag behind. I've personally experienced this problem as well in multiple organizations and multiple projects, and I think others here also have experienced this problem in other organizations as well, and you can see that this can be quite challenging. So what kind of users are there? So there's we've already talked a bit about the data manager, and the data manager is pretty much completely responsible, almost completely responsible for development of the model, the BI model in the organization, and to solve problems in there as well. And meanwhile, we also talked a bit about the casual user, the normal user that only has the user system to check the insights. And if they see a problem, they have to, or want something new, they have to request it to the data manager, and this often follows a very bureaucratic procedure. And also, if the data manager often wants to change something, they also have to follow some kind of bureaucratic process, in which this can hinder a lot of the development. In the middle we also have the power user, and these are relatively self-taught experts that usually can find their own way into the software, and this can help quite a lot as data managers have a limited supported role to fulfill for these users. And what can SSBI do in this situation? It can convert more people from the casual side to the power side, in which more time is freed up for the data manager, so they can concern themselves more with the development of the model instead of just putting out small fires. So this kind of needs some kind of configurational change or structural change. On the left side you can see the traditional system. It's a centralized system with predefined insights, and any adjustments and creations need to be requested. On the right side you can see more the system that is required for the SSBI system, in which data is sent to the user, and the user can combine and visualize data themselves, and they often do this in more user-friendly decentralized software. This requires the user to be somewhat data literate, and this means that this can have some problems with there as well. And some we already talked about, like the user's lack of transparency and lack of required human capital. But it also there is that there are multiple schools of thought on this, and they can often disagree with each other, and this can tamper with any collective development. Meanwhile, this kind of topic can be seen as quite complex, in which often multiple roles are necessary. For instance, algorithm production, data management, even data visualization, and even the users are affected there as well, because they're part of the puzzle. And this every puzzle piece in there needs to fit perfectly together in order to make this a perceived success for the user. And this can be quite a daunting task. There are also some other perceptions, limitations, and inclinations that can play a role. So first there's red tape or bureaucracy that can play a role. This can be actually perceived time-consuming, and this can hinder users making changes or even data managers making changes. There's also a lack of introduction, as in the traditional sense, organizations often acquire an application, implement it, and just think the users will do everything what they are intended to do with them. And this often doesn't work, as this can lead to improper usage, even inefficiency, and even less user satisfaction. Also, there are personal afflictions that can take also, let's say, tunnel vision, like unimportant aspects become more wastefully concerning when making decisions about this. Also, intuition that can be non-aligned, as especially with older users, as they tend to rely more on accumulated experience over the years and holistical views instead of methodical methods. And probably the big one is the Dunning-Kruger effect, in which unskilled users are often unaware of their deficiencies, and this will bring about an inflated self-confidence, as you can see more on the chart on the right. So you can see that there are many potential breaks that can make or fall on project, and it can all arise if not considered. And it almost looks like as a near perfect implementation is necessary in order to make a perceived success. And I think others have also experienced this as well, because I've also seen this issue also in multiple projects, not only specific to SSBI as well. So to research this, we set up a research question that is what user analytical capabilities are determinants for successful organizational SSBI implementations. And we have devised it further up into hypotheses, and you can see them on the screen right now. And even these have been further divided and to make actual measurements applicable to them. So also to research this, we needed participants, and participants were selected from multiple organizations. They can be intern organizations, Google Maps, vacancy websites, social contacts, and also referral effect was used in order to increase the sample level, as we had a quite a daunting recruitment time during the COVID-19 outbreak. Also, some premises were there as well. When our organization was approached, we asked for a representative. We can select potential users as they have more acquainted knowledges and acquainted people inside the organization, which can be potential users. Also, software had to be selected, so we first had to abstractly define what an SSBI application is, and to increase validity and to conform to research limitations, we also had to take 3 only in the example, and they had to be different from manufacturers. And we triangulated the results from Gartner's BI quadrant and the search popularity analysis, when we ended up with Microsoft Power BI, Tableau, and ClickSense. So participants did assignments, so everybody got first a survey asking for their opinions on the matter and their characteristics that could be related, and then they got 3 strategic questions, and they asked to devise an organization, and with this organization think of a competitive advantage and a metric to suit this. After which they got 3 practical questions, and they can be how many customers are there, how many employees are there, and they had to answer this with a data set and a visualization. 2 of these can be seen as more easy and 1 more difficult. After they were done with that, they got graded on it, and there were 2 main components, and this is first of all the effectiveness components, which have the affiliated questions like the strategic questions and the practical questions. But as they made visualizations, also the technicalities of following technical functions and following visual principles could be graded as well. There's also opinion data on the matter, so what their view is on the BI concept, their own capabilities, their organization's capabilities, and any favorability on their organizational plan, if there was known. And so some miscellaneous data there as well, so like their age, their software, etc. So this gathers quite a lot of data all in all, and we can apply some methods to that as well, some measurement methods. And first of all was the classification method, in which this is kind of similar to control and experimental group studies. And this mainly finds differences between selections, categories, and that kind of thing. And these differences can be positive or negative. In the middle, we can also find correlation, and correlation finds association between two ordinal data skills. It can also be positive or negative. And this mainly finds a trend line into data. And as last, we also got quadratic relations, and this pretty much finds balances and extremes, and this is related to correlation as it finds the n types or u types into data. And all these measurement methods have related constraints and whether they get accepted or not. So first of all was the validity measurements. Every finding had some validity measurements as well. They can be t-values, p-values, standard deviation, the amount of observations that can be play a role. Experts got approached as well with a form in which the findings were explained and they could confirm them or debunk them. Similar is done with examples that can be found in literature and online blog posts, and with literature they can also confirm or debunk it, and the same can be with the blog posts we measured the sentiment and urgency, and in related solutions or related problems. And as last we also used a Jacquard index, and this is for the correlations. We split up the ordinal data scales and we can correlate them with each other and to find if they have an expected pattern. So the following 4 sheets are going to briefly show you some data out of the research. I'm going to slowly scroll through this, and you can take a look. Perhaps afterwards we take a better look, and you don't have to remember anything. I'm not going to test you on this. So these are the things in the research that can be counted to see what the validity was. So there's counts and unique counts in this. This is for all the ordinal data scales. You can see the mean, the median, and the mode. And of all nominal categories, you can also see the mode here as well. And for all ordinal data scales, you can also see here the standard deviation, the range, and the IQR. So what did we find in this data? So first we can conclude that users were able to make simple visualizations, and this can conclude to one category and one measurement per visualization, as all their performance was above 60% and was set around 71%. However, this can be contextually different. For example, banks may emphasize information accuracy a bit more, as they kind of are sometimes those visualizations can relate more to have a lower fault tolerance level. That's also the reason why experts were not unanimously convinced about this verdict, and thereby the emphasis on simple. On the right side, you can see what training does for overall performance, and you can see that it enhances performance greatly. And this can be any kind of training, so like database training, visualization training, that kind of thing, as long as they stated it. Also, software functions were there as well, so users of software labeling their measurements, sorted their data, or refrained from any scrolling feature also did largely better as well. And on the right side, you can see people that used data from multiple tables or chose the right visualization method to apply it for the data also did quite a lot better as well. However, these two were late additions, and more of that on the conclusions. So onto software. So for software was deemed that Tableau was the most suited for inexperienced users and ClickSense the least suited. However, the expert panel had another idea about it, and they chose Power BI. However, the expert may have chosen their own favorite, so this was loosely seen there as well, but nonetheless I've stated it. Also, predefined abilities were all highly correlated with their effectiveness component, as expected. However, their coefficient differed, so the most attributing was the practical abilities, and the least attributing was the strategic abilities. On the right side, you can also see what higher educational level does with overall performance. It was correlated with overall performance. However, they had quite a lot of accuracy issues. It had a weak correlation also with strategic questions. However, with the strategic questions, they had quite a little bit more reliability on there. So what this means is that higher educated users know better what to measure in an organization. There were also some user characteristics that have been found into their backgrounds, and it's also seen as the people that had some form of business education and some work experience and computer science backgrounds also did marginally better as well, and also with quite a lot of accuracy rating. So this is kind of expected, but is there as well. Also, another user characteristic that was found was people that use some form of control process in their way of working, and pretty much everybody does this. However, this was a large fluctuating pattern, as there was a small group that did not do this, and their performance was profoundly worse. And what this means is that people checked whether their implemented category or implemented measurement have the intended result it started with, so a kind of control thing. And you can see the results of there. So it's always advisable to do that. Some balances and extremes were there as well, so middle-aged users tended to perform greater visually, and this was deemed as one of the most accurate measurements that we've found so far. And the last balance and extreme that was found was the evidence for the Dunning-Kruger effect. It has been measured as well, so you can see the example that we use for the quadratic relations in the methods. It is actually the same data that have been used for the prove the Dunning-Kruger effect. And the effect was minimal but reliable, and this means that higher performing users tended to underestimate their abilities and or be more truthful about it, and lower scoring participants tend to overestimate their abilities. So the following two sheets briefly summarize the findings, and you can also see how they relate with each other. And this is the first page, and there are two. And this is the second one. So there are many potential biases and limitations that have been found in this research, and we can also say that there are many probably also undetected there as well. But three have been deemed as more substantial ones. So there's a large non-response bias in this research, and that was largely due to the research setup, as I have a tendency to overextend any research, but also largely attributed to the COVID-19 outbreak during the recruitment process and the field research time. It's also tempered quite a lot with the research. Also, software market is way more saturated than the three included applications. There are likely many more candidates that are similar, but also the market is saturated with a lot more other packages, so like program BI and things like Excel, semi-fit packages. There's a lot of options to choose from, so this might not actually be that valid for all the other types of BI that is available. Also, some of the methods that have been used for reliabilities, for example, the block stacks analysis was a bit more unfounded in whether that was valid or not. This is largely due as for the late editions there was which could not be included into the expert form. We used block stack analysis for this, and topics were found that maybe in the title was related and therefore it was selected. However, solving the problem could be something different, and therefore it was still counted therefore, and it could be a bit more invalid. So also the mean reliability and validity in this research can be seen as reasonably good, as all inequality p-values were about 0.41% and was reasonably good. The mean reliability in the research was 2/3 of the sources that could confirm the findings, which was actually also reasonable, and all conventional p-values scored about, below 0.01, which is reasonable. Validity was well found. It was done along with the research numbers. However, cardinality on the reliability seems a bit lower at 22 to 23, as however this was founded by expert opinions in that validity calculations or peer-reviewed research. And on the screen you can also see what have been the most and least valid and reliable measurement that we have, a finding that we have found. So what can we recommend with this? So any appropriate or adjusted user training or selection process based on the findings is advisable. For example, teach users how to make proper visualization methods, or to test users before selecting them, how they sort their visualizations could be interesting, could be advisable as well. And some awareness on the Dunning-Kruger effect for any over and underestimation, estimation by users before they get selected. So it's always advisable to test users before they get selected on this, as user judgments tend to be quite unreliable on that. Any future research may be to strengthen this research, or similar researches in which the biases were not present get possibly strengthen this result or even debunk it. The same goes for recommendations, as they were all based on the findings and not individually tested. Then this can be also good to have some future research about this. And then perhaps this could be proven useful for people as well. Also, different directions were there, so we only had users for a few hours. What does a few months of exploring do could also be quite interesting. And some technical failure factors, as this research tends to be quite business focused. If we can have the same research but with a technical focus, then we can probably see what data availability does for success, or governance controls does for success. So this can be also quite interesting. So basically the lesson here is to always test users if they are suited for the SSBI concept, and people can be trained to make more suited for the SSBI concept, and we can always check whether people's judgments are reliable for implementation. It's not perfect advice, but maybe it can help a lot of people, and then my job is pretty much done, and this pretty much concludes my story. Thank you very much for listening, and you probably have some questions and I'll be happy to answer them.